In June of 1978, a movie about a leather-jacketed greaser and a wholesome Australian transfer student opened in theaters and never really left our lives. Grease became the highest-grossing musical of its era, turned summer nights and You're the One That I Want into permanent fixtures of every wedding reception and karaoke night since, and made household names out of a cast that, at the time, nobody expected to still be talking about nearly 5 decades later. It was based on a stage musical that had already been running successfully for years before Paramount brought it to the screen, and the studio stacked the supporting cast with veterans of 1950s film and television, giving the movie a strange but effective blend of fresh young faces and old Hollywood professionalism. Behind the scenes, the production had its share of odd choices too. An adult film actor was briefly attached to play the gym coach before nerves at the studio led to a last-minute recasting, and the film's setting was shifted from a grittier, urban Chicago high school in the original stage version to the sunnier, more suburban Rydell High that audiences came to know. None of that behind-the-scenes trivia mattered much once the movie hit theaters and became a phenomenon almost overnight. Now it's 2025, 47 years removed from that first screening, and the story of what happened to the people of Rydell High is just as compelling as anything that happened on screen. Some of them became some of the biggest stars in the world. Some of them walked away from Hollywood entirely and built quieter, entirely different lives. Some of them, sadly, aren't with us anymore to see how much their movie still means to people, decades after the cameras stopped rolling, and a handful slipped almost entirely out of public view, their later years known only through the occasional convention appearance or fansite update. Taken together, their collective story says something bigger about fame itself, about how a single summer spent filming a high school musical in 1977 could end up shaping, or completely failing to define, the rest of a person's life. This is where they all ended up. Let's start with the biggest name in the cast. When John Travolta put on Danny Zuko's leather jacket, he wasn't some unknown actor hoping for a break. He'd already caused a sensation a year before in Saturday Night Fever, and Grease cemented him as the biggest young star on the planet. But fame like that rarely stays in a straight line. Through the 80s, Travolta's career cooled off considerably, and he spent years bouncing between forgettable projects before Quentin Tarantino handed him a career-defining second act in 1994's Pulp Fiction, earning him an Oscar nomination and reminding everyone why he'd become a star in the first place. From there, he built one of the most durable careers in the industry, moving through action films like Face/Off, comedies like Get Shorty, and a full-circle return to musicals when he played Edna Turnblad in 2007's Hairspray. He even returned to the world of Grease directly, teaming up one more time with his old co-star for a holiday album and a handful of nostalgic reunions. Off-screen, Travolta's life has carried real tragedy alongside the success. He was married to actress Kelly Preston for nearly 3 decades, and the two raised 3 children together. Their son Jet died in 2009 after a seizure, a loss that shook the family deeply. And then in 2020, Kelly herself passed away following a battle with breast cancer. Travolta has spoken openly since then about grief, about raising his remaining children, and about leaning on his faith and his flying career. He's a licensed pilot and has long been an ambassador for an airline to get through it. As of 2025, he's still very much a working actor, still beloved at fan conventions, and still, by every account, the same warm, chatty guy who made Danny Zuko feel like someone you already knew. If Travolta was the king of Grease, Olivia Newton-John was its heart. What a lot of casual fans never quite realized was that the very American Sandy was played by an Australian singer who'd already built a massive country and pop career before she ever set foot on the Rydell High set. Her ballad, Hopelessly Devoted to You, became a top 5 hit, and the momentum only grew from there. 1981's Physical turned her into one of the defining pop voices of the decade, and she toured for years afterward, including a long residency in Las Vegas in the mid-2010s. Her personal life took her through 2 marriages, first to actor Matt Lattanzi, with whom she had her only child, a daughter named Chloe, and later to businessman John Easterling. But the story most people associate with Olivia in her later years is her extraordinarily public and courageous fight with breast cancer, a battle she first faced in the late 1980s, and that returned, more aggressively, decades later. She became one of the most visible advocates for cancer research and wellness of her generation, turning her own diagnosis into a platform to help others. She continued performing and speaking out even as the disease progressed, and in August of 2022, she passed away at her ranch in California at the age of 73. Her death hit the entertainment world hard, in part because so many people who grew up on Grease felt like they were losing a piece of their own childhood. Travolta posted an emotional tribute calling her his dearest friend, and in the years since, fans have continued to celebrate her at Grease anniversary events, a reminder that Sandy Olson never really left the cultural conversation. Stockard Channing was already 33 years old when she played the tough, sharp-tongued leader of the Pink Ladies, a fact that still surprises people who assume everyone in that cast was a teenager. Rizzo gave the film its edge and its emotional gut punch, especially in the ballad, "There Are Worse Things I Could Do." And Channing used the visibility from Grease to build one of the most respected careers of anyone in the cast. She earned an Academy Award nomination for her work in 6 Degrees of Separation, won a Tony for her stage work, and later became known to a whole new generation of television viewers as First Lady Abby Bartlett on The West Wing, a role that brought her an Emmy. She has continued working steadily in film, television, and theater in the years since, and remains one of the most consistently working and respected actresses to come out of that original cast, still taking on prestige roles well into her 80s. Jeff Conaway's story is one of the more bittersweet ones in the Grease family. Before the movie, he'd actually originated the role of Danny Zuko on stage, with Travolta playing a supporting part in that same production, a twist of casting fate that worked out well for both of them once the film came together and Conaway slid into Kenickie instead. He carried real momentum coming off of Grease, having already earned back-to-back Golden Globe nominations for his work on Taxi and appearing in Happy Days, and for a while it looked like his career might rival his co-stars. But Conaway struggled publicly with addiction for much of his adult life, a battle he was candid about in later years, including appearances on Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew that showed just how hard that fight had become. He passed away in 2011 at the age of 60, and while his life after Grease didn't follow the same trajectory as some of his castmates, Kenickie remains one of the most fondly remembered characters in the film, and Conaway's talent is still cited by fans and colleagues who worked alongside him. Didi Khan's Frenchie, the beauty school dropout with the pink-streaked hair, is one of the most beloved supporting characters in the movie, and Khan has spent decades embracing that legacy rather than running from it. She was one of the few original cast members to return for the 1982 sequel, Grease 2, reprising Frenchie once again, and she went on to build a long career in television, including a lead role on the sitcom Benson and years spent as the conductor on the beloved children's series, Shining Time Station. She came back to the world of Grease once more for the 2016 live television broadcast, taking on a new role as a nod to the original film. Khan has remained one of the most visible and active ambassadors for the movie's legacy, regularly appearing at anniversary screenings, fan conventions, and retrospectives, always ready to talk about what it was like being part of something that so clearly outlived its era. Barry Pearl played Duty, the boyish, guitar-strumming member of the T-Birds who gets handed the microphone during those magic changes, and while he never became a household name the way some of his co-stars did, he's had a long and steady career as a working character actor in the decades since. He's appeared in guest roles across a wide range of television series, including House and Baywatch, picking up small but recognizable parts that kept him working steadily without ever chasing the kind of leading man fame his old castmate Travolta found. Like Didi Khan, he came back for a cameo in the 2016 live Grease broadcast, this time playing a teacher rather than a student. A nice bit of role reversal for someone who spent 1978 playing a teenager. Pearl has remained active in the entertainment industry and continues to show up at Grease-related fan events and anniversary panels, where he's known as one of the most approachable and good-humored members of the original cast, always happy to swap stories from the Rydell High set. Michael Tucci played Sonny, the T-Bird who famously looked a few years older than everyone else sitting in the cafeteria, and his career after Grease took him in a direction a lot of casual fans don't expect, heavily into the world of live theater. He's had a substantial career on Broadway, building a reputation as a reliable stage performer, alongside guest appearances on television shows like Diagnosis, Murder, and comedic work on projects such as its Gary Shandling show. Beyond acting, Tucci has spent significant time working as a drama teacher and theater coach, passing along decades of stagecraft to younger performers rather than continuing to chase screen roles himself. He remains an active and respected figure in the theater community today, and like much of the cast, he still turns up at reunions and retrospectives celebrating the film, always willing to talk about how strange it was to play a high schooler in his 30s. Kelly Ward, who played the T-Birds' resident dance contest disaster Pootsie, made one of the more interesting career pivots in the entire cast. Rather than staying in front of the camera chasing more acting roles, Ward moved behind it in the early 1980s, eventually becoming a voice director for Disney Animation and building a parallel career as a screenwriter. It's a quieter kind of legacy than some of his co-stars, but an influential one. Voice direction shapes how animated performances land with audiences, and Ward spent decades doing that work largely out of the spotlight, shaping projects most viewers would never associate with the actor who once got shoved into a swimming pool as Pootsie. He occasionally resurfaces for Grease anniversary interviews and fan conventions, but by and large, he's traded the spotlight for a career built behind the microphone booth instead. Jamie Donnelly's Jan, the ever-snacking, endlessly loyal Pink Lady, is one of those characters fans quote constantly even if they can't always place the actress's name. Donnelly continued acting in smaller television and guest roles after Grease, but in the years since, she has spent much of her time working as an acting coach based in Southern California, helping train the next generation of performers rather than chasing leading roles herself. Dinah Manoff's Marty had maybe the smallest amount of screen time among the main Pink Ladies, but she left an outsized impression, and her career afterward proved she had real range. She won a Tony Award in 1982 for her stage work in I Ought to Be in Pictures, took on a memorably creepy role in the original Child's Play film in 1988, and later became familiar to television audiences as a regular on the Golden Girls spin-off Empty Nest. She's continued working in television in the decades since, carving out a career that's arguably more varied than most of her Grease castmates. Susan Buckner played Patty Simcox, the relentlessly chipper cheerleader who never quite got the guy, and her path to Hollywood actually started in pageantry. She held the title of Miss Washington and went on to compete at the Miss America pageant before ever landing a role in front of a movie camera. After Grease, she worked steadily in television, showing up on shows like The Love Boat, BJ and the Bear, and the Hardy Boys/Nancy Drew Mysteries, and she took a noticeably darker turn appearing in Wes Craven's horror film Deadly Blessing alongside a young Sharon Stone. She later popped up in the comedy sequel Police Academy 6 before easing out of acting almost entirely. In the years since, Buckner has largely stepped back from the public eye, choosing a quieter life away from the industry compared to some of her more visible castmates, and she remains one of the harder original cast members to track down for interviews or convention appearances. Annette Charles played Cha-Cha, the best dancer at Rydell with the worst reputation, and her path after Grease is one of the more unexpected in the whole cast. Rather than continuing to chase acting roles full-time, she went back to school, earned a master's degree in social work, and eventually became a speech communication professor at California State University, Northridge, building a respected academic career alongside occasional small guest roles on television. She passed away from lung cancer in 2011, but she's remembered by former students as much as she is by movie fans, which says something about the kind of second act she built for herself. Dennis Stewart played the growling, chain-wielding leader of the rival Scorpions gang, a role that mostly required looking menacing across a handful of scenes. He worked in smaller film and television roles in the years following Grease, though he never sought out the same level of visibility as some of his co-stars, and information about his more recent activities has stayed comparatively private compared to the rest of the ensemble. Lorenzo Lamas, playing the dim but well-meaning Jock Tom Chisholm, actually had the shortest distance to travel towards stardom of anyone in the supporting cast, since he was already the son of Hollywood royalty. His father was actor Fernando Lamas. Lorenzo went on to have a major career of his own, headlining the primetime soap Falcon Crest through most of the 1980s, and later starring in the action series Renegade in the 1990s. He's remained a working actor in the decades since, popping up in projects like Big Time Rush, and he even took a turn as a judge on a short-lived reality competition series. He remains one of the more recognizable faces from the film's supporting cast, largely thanks to that decades-long television career running parallel to his Grease legacy. Eddie Deezen played Eugene, the endlessly bullied nerd whose nasal voice became instantly recognizable to an entire generation. He actually returned to reprise Eugene in the 1982 sequel, and afterward built a long career as a specialist in a very particular type of nerdy comic relief, appearing across television and independent films before shifting almost entirely into voice acting, a natural fit given his distinctive delivery. Deezen eventually stepped away from performing altogether in the mid-2010s, retiring from the industry after a career built almost entirely on being instantly identifiable the second he opened his mouth. Frankie Avalon was already a major star from the late 1950s and early 1960s teen idol era by the time he showed up in Grease's dream sequence showstopper Beauty School Dropout, and the role introduced him to an entirely new generation of fans. He's continued performing for decades since, and remarkably, after a lengthy break from the recording studio, he returned in the 2020s to record a new duet version of Beauty School Dropout, proof that the song and the performer never really lost their audience. Sid Caesar, a legend of early television comedy, played gym teacher Coach Calhoun, and his casting as one of the stranger behind-the-scenes stories in the film. Adult film performer Harry Riems was originally set for the role before studio executives got nervous and replaced him with Caesar instead. Caesar returned for Grease 2 and continued working with longtime collaborator Mel Brooks on projects like History of the World, Part 1, along with television specials, before writing a couple of memoirs later in life. He passed away in 2014 at the age of 91, closing out one of the longest and most influential comedy careers of the 20th century. Eve Arden, already a veteran star from decades of film and television by the time she took on the exhausted, deadpan Principal McGee, brought a level of comic timing to the role that